Let's turn to our roundtable discussion. These primaries were seen as a litmus test to see how well the Washington establishment could hold its own in this political summer of discontent. In Florida and Alaska, the picture is unclear. So how does this impact both parties with November fast approaching? Jamal Simmons is a Democratic strategist and Cheri Jacobus, a Republican strategist, and both join me now in the studio. So Cheri, let's start with you. The headline for your party, Alaska. Right?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any question that the impact of Sarah Palin is still very strong. And as you just had pointed out, this was a bit of a rematch with the Murkowski family, because 4 years ago, this young upstart named Sarah Palin unseated the incumbent in the primary. So I think what we found is that this was more than just a Hatfield and McCoy situation, that this, in fact, really matters. I think the impact of the Tea Party is clear. I don't think Republicans can rest easy, because obviously the Tea Party is not around just to help the Republican Party. They want to really affect policy in this country. So it's not just a given that it's a clear road for Republicans. They still have to work for it. I think the big news, the really big news during this primary season is that for the first time for the better part of a century in a midterm, the so-called off-year elections, midterm elections, Republican primary turnout is through the roof and better than what Democrats have done. And I think that's the real problem area for Republicans, or for Democrats rather, in the fall, because clearly Republicans plus the Tea Party movement, which isn't a party, but is certainly a movement that so far seems to be favoring Republicans, at least some Republicans. This is a huge problem for the Democrats, that they seem unable to energize their voters to get out in a primary season. So that's what's going to make the big difference in November.
And Jamal, speaking of Democratic turnout in November, this Florida Senate race is going to be a big deal for Democrats.
The Florida Senate race is a big deal. So is the Florida governor's race. I mean, one thing that happens in Florida is the governor has a veto over any redistricting plans. So who wins the governor's race not only says something about how the state is governed, it also says something about how they pick the congressional districts for the next cycle. So right now, Alex Sink is looking very good. You had a greater Republican turnout in Florida last night, but Alex Sink got more votes than, and she didn't even have an opponent, but she got more votes than Scott did yesterday in that election. So, and they spent $70 million, the Republicans did, on their campaigns and doing turnout and all that, while the Democrats did not do that, didn't spend as much money. So I do think going into the fall, we feel pretty confident. If you look at what's happening in the Senate race, there's a variety of factors that are at play there. You got Kendrick Meek, who's from the southern part of the state, but you've also got a ticket now that represents, you've got candidates from there from Tampa, which is a central part of the state. You've got Kendrick Meek there from South Florida. You've got people there from the northern panhandle. So you've got a variety, Orlando, you've got a variety of people on that entire state ticket that are really going to help drive out Democrats' turnout throughout the fall.
And as the Miami Herald wrote this morning, Kendrick Meek doesn't have much time to savor his victory. The Miami Herald says he wakes up Wednesday somewhat bruised, very broke, and polling in last place behind a national Republican superstar, Marco Rubio, and the sitting governor, Charlie Crist. So what's the next step for your party down there?
Well, what's going to be tough for Crist is he actually drew the bad straw last night, because by having Kendrick Meek in the race, core Democrats are going to stick with Kendrick Meek. The question for Congressman Meek is, can he get his Democratic performance up to about 80-85%? If he can get 80-85% of Democrats, he should be able to win that race. Crist, on the other hand, is looking at trying to peel away some of those Democrats. People in the state tell me that Crist can probably expect to split about 50% of the independents. He may get about 25% of the Republicans, but he's going to need about 42% of Democrats in order to win that race. So if Kendrick Meek can consolidate Democrats, Marco Rubio can consolidate Republicans, that could leave Crist sitting alone in the middle, and you see a Democrat coming through there in the Senate.
Yeah, but Jamal, the one group of Democrats that you seem to be forgetting about are the ones that are in the White House and the ones that are in Washington, the people that really control the money. And if Meeks can't get President Obama and the establishment Democrats who control the money, then that's really a group he has to worry about. Now, we hear rumors that he's sort of given the message, sort of a wink and a nudge, that it's okay for the big money folks to start giving to Meeks. But, the Democrats have a big problem in terms of who are they going to support. Chris seems like the stronger candidate. He'll caucus with the Democrats, but Meeks is a traditional Democrat, and he obviously holds the African-American vote and the base, but he's got to do more than that. He is the one that has to peel votes away from Charlie Crist. So the establishment Democrats, the leaders leaders in Washington that control the purse strings, especially the president, have a big decision to make, and anything less than full, vocal, and 100% support for the Democratic candidate in Florida is going to hurt that candidate, and I think hurt the party.
Well, a little bit of a
which
test.
I'm fine with, by the way.
A little bit of the test for Kendrick Meek is going to be, what can he do with his poll numbers in the near term? He's down to about $2 million. He needs to raise some more money. He needs to get those poll numbers up. Right now, he's in the teens. If he gets in the 20s, you'll see Democrats start to come back, and we think he'll get a little bit of a bounce out of last night. He's been looking very strong, and I think what happened in this primary is he got to be a tougher candidate and a better candidate. The way he performed last night and over the course of the last couple of weeks is going to give a lot of Democrats heart. You should see him raise some money, raise those poll numbers, in which case I think more money will come to him as a Democrat, and then he'll be able to beat back any challenge from Charlie Crist pretty well.
You're very optimistic. I mean, that's a very rosy scenario. I think the problem is bigger. Obviously, Crist is the big elephant in the room, or former elephant, I should say, since he's no longer a Republican, and that's a big problem for Meeks. And Meeks just has to get Obama there. I mean, there's no question. The Democratic Party, the DNC, the DCCC, they have to come out full support behind Meeks and put everything they have behind it, or no one's going to believe it. Everybody's going to think that this is a sign that you can give money to Crist.
Well, Cheri's talking a lot about the impact it's going to have on Kendrick Meek, but she's leaving off Marco Rubio, who is the Republican candidate in this race. And the truth is, everyone suspects that if Crist were to win this race, he doesn't have a lot of friends in his former party. So if he shows up in Washington, he'll probably show up in caucus as an independent Democrat, much like Joe Lieberman. And if that happens, that's bad for the Republicans. So Rubio, actually, and the Republicans have a big problem here, because I think you are going to see a food fight take place between Rubio and Crist, because Rubio's got to beat Crist down and keep him from becoming that much of a
Which I think
candidate.
he can do. I think the momentum is with Rubio. I mean, he's a rock star now. He's relatively new to the scene, and we're learning about him nationally just in the past 18 months. The momentum is with him. I don't think that Charlie Crist has garnered a lot of goodwill from Republicans. There might be some loyalists out there who stick with him. Maybe he'll drop off after last night. So I think that Rubio is the one with the wind at his back.
And a lot of that momentum behind Rubio would be attributed to the Tea Party, Sarah Palin endorsements, and that idea. How are her endorsements going to fare in November?
I think it'll be a mixed bag, to be honest. I think there's some areas where she's clearly very, very strong, but I don't think that candidates should rely just on a Palin endorsement to get them over the finish line. I think that the fiscal conservative message is very, very strong, and if they stick to that, talking about jobs, talking about the spending in Washington, that's what the Tea Party movement is about. But the Tea Partiers, again, they're not a party, and they're not the Republican Party. They are keeping all candidates and office holders in check. They're sending a big message. Sarah Palin is obviously a part of that. She's not the leader of the Tea Party. She might be considered one. But they're trying to define the Tea Party movement and the people in it as being all on the same page about everything is like herding cats. It can't be done, and that's really to their advantage, because when the left comes out and tries to ridicule them and marginalize them, it just makes them stronger. So it's a fascinating time in American politics to watch the impact of the Tea Party movement.
Absolutely, and
what you're noticing here is you're noticing the Republicans trying to distance themselves a little bit from the Tea Party now that they're moving into the general election, because the Tea Party is great at turning out primary voters. But the question is, do these Tea Party candidates that they've drawn a lot in all these states, are these candidates actually going to be able to compete among the general elected and among electorate and independents in the fall? And I think the jury's out on that. Democrats feel pretty confident if you look at places like Kentucky with Rand Paul and some of these other states that we've picked a pretty good crop of Republican candidates to run against in a year where we really ought to be in much more trouble.